Hey guys, welcome to another audit commentary done by Diggity. This is MSL Season 3 Group E, the losers match between Ruby and Never, or fOrG or fOrGG, if you prefer to call him that. I'm going to go by Never because that's the moniker he's chosen for this match. Thank you to all my listeners and all my subscribers. I am now ranked 31st, up from 78th and then 51st among most viewed, most subscriptions in this week among directors. I really appreciate it. I really feel like I'm doing something right. In this matchup, by the way, I've watched this gameplay ahead of time. I really wanted to get one VOD out that shows the difference between being prepared for a match, knowing what's going to happen, versus being unprepared for a match, trying to commentate it live. I've made a couple mistakes in other matches that I am very aware of. For example, calling layers hives, things like that. If you notice anything that's egregious, go ahead and message me, but don't need to constantly put it in the comments. I do know what's happening. But yeah, this is about, what, my 10th, 11th, 12th, something around their commentary. I only expect to get better at this, and I hope you guys enjoy it as I go along the way. Starting this match, we've got Ruby in the lower left-hand corner in orange at that 7 o'clock position. That's a picture of Ruby right there, and we have Never in the upper right-hand position in red, about that 1 o'clock position. This map is Blue Storm. It's kind of an interesting map. You've got that kind of direct line in between both bases through kind of this narrow passage. But most of the troop movements that are large you're going to be seeing happening from the south of the north base and from the north of the south base. That is the direct exit. There's kind of a ramp that you'll see once the SCVs go out, and that's where you're going to see most of the major troop movements kind of flood in, except for kind of siege tanks over the ridge, where they're using that ridge to kind of protect them. Commenting on the prior matches, I really got to give Never this match simply because Ruby's confidence has to be absolutely shaken in that last match versus Savior. Ruby not doing anything terribly wrong, it's just Savior just absolutely bowled him over. The only mistake I really saw Ruby make in that match is he had a panic attack, quite literally an attack out of panic. He rushed in with a decent-sized group of Firebats, Marines, and Medics into Savior's base when there were 3 sunken colonies down and a group of Mutalisks and Lings hovering around it. And really what he needed to do is just hold that position, make sure no additional forces could just start flooding down into his base. He could have fought off basically an attack that was happening in his base by Savior right that moment, just with the units that were producing out of his 4 barracks. Instead, he pushed those forces in. They ended up getting slaughtered, and really that was kind of the end point for Ruby. Once you lose forces and you're just totally wiped out, and Mutalisks are en route, and you're playing against Savior, really, yeah, it's GG at that point. Both players going for that early refinery, early barrack build. I would expect, yeah, single barrack into factory. It's a pretty standard strategy in Terran versus Terran. The question is whether they're going to go for a second factory or if they're going to do kind of the upper level tech, whether they're going to secure that extra secondary, kind of where they vary there. Never, I didn't expect to see him in this match. I really expected him to defeat Sangho. Unfortunately, Sangho pulling those carriers out at the late game, and which really has been successful for Protoss in these matches thus far. And really, I think that proves that in this map set, you don't have large open field, so I don't feel like Goliaths are very effective against carrier forces. Really, there's too many areas where carriers can just kind of pull back across kind of building lines and across map artifact lines to escape, more or less. Right now, Never trying to pull this Marine down too late, can't block off that ramp. Looks like Ruby's going to get a spot on his base. Ruby, in the meantime, doing a little bit of advantage to the Marine, but just trying to push on by so we can get a spot on the base. Sees that barrack, sees the factory. Right now we have kind of a mere tactics going on. In the meantime, Never down, attacking that Marine in Ruby's base, forcing Ruby to commit a little bit of micro, doing a really a poor job, actually, on Ruby's part, almost losing that Marine. I think that kind of shows you how his confidence has been shaken in this match. In the meantime, looks like, I would assume with that barrack going out, one to float to do the spot, and kind of going over that secondary with that Marine pushed up, that he might be going for that secondary early, Never, I should say. In the meantime, Starport going up for Ruby, so Ruby's going to go for the early tech versus a dual factory for Never. Never going to, looks like Vulture push. He could also kind of go for a tank push if he wanted to. But either way, this is going to be an interesting match because it's not a very large map, so you're not going to have a big advantage with the Wraith in the long field. So the question is are the overwhelming, well, not overwhelming, are the forces of Never that he's producing out of those two factories going to be enough to inflict enough damage in Ruby's base before Ruby can really get a significant Wraith Force out? And also, on Ruby's part, is he going to be able to keep the tech down on Never's side so he can't fight the Wraiths off? Looks like Ruby is looking out. He's going to kind of spot his secondary. Never, in the meantime, I don't think he has any sort of spot. He hasn't sent any sort of second scout down, so he's not going to know that this rush is coming. He's got 2 vultures on the field, but he's going to hold those back until he has the mines, until he has the speed upgrade. In the meantime, he's just going to rely on that barrack floating down, but that's going to be too late to see that Wraith out. In the meantime, yes, it looks like Ruby has gone for that secondary. That's a little ill-advised considering he's going for that early tech rush. He's going to end up with forces. In the meantime, Never has sent down a second scout, but it gets intercepted by those 2 vultures. Both Marines go down. In the meantime, looks like Ruby is setting up his own vultures. He's going to try to get a spot in Never's base, make sure he's not doing anything unexpected, but he's going to lose these 2 vultures to this 4 vulture force, not doing an excellent job of just committing forces to a single vulture, try to do as much damage as possible. In the meantime, he's got that command center, that control tower up. He's canceled that command center. He knows that that large amount of force is coming down. He's going to build that command center within his base and then float it out when he gets the opportunity, doing an excellent job using that command center actually for extra blockade against these 4 vultures that are bearing down on his base. We'll see if he can get those cloaked wraiths out in time in Never's base to do significant damage. He's trying to pull his Marines back. Looks like they're going to get intercepted by those vultures. Yes, they do. They end up dying. In the meantime, vultures and trying to inflict damage on that single tank. He's going to have to pull those vultures out, though. Drops mines at the front. That's going to absolutely commit Ruby to doing this Wraith Rush, because 1, he's not going to be able to produce a ton of tanks. 2, even if he does produce tanks, he's not going to be able to push them out of the front against those mines until he gets a decent degree of protection. First Wraith out, he hasn't set it to attack those vultures, so he is going to commit this wisely to Never's base. Really, there's no reason for him to commit those forces to defend his front. In the meantime, Never coming down with those tanks. Those are probably going to have siege tech well before Ruby has siege tech, simply because he has those 2 factories, he has those 2 machine shops out. In the meantime, trying to finish that command center. He's building his own academy.